There is a quiet way in which endings arrive. They do not announce themselves with fanfare or sudden revelation, not at first. They slip in softly, like twilight edging across a familiar landscape, painting the sky in shades so gradual you hardly notice when day has ceased to be day and night has begun its patient reign. Eras, like people, carry within them this same subtle transition. The end comes first as a whisper and only later as a collapse. If we pay attention, the world is always teaching us this. Leaves do not all fall at once. They surrender themselves one by one, drifting silently to the ground. The forest does not mourn their departure, for it has witnessed this many times before. A river does not dry in an instant. It thins, it slows, it stutters, and then one day the bed lies bare. Even within the fragile span of a single life, we see it. A voice weakening over the years, a body fading in increments, until suddenly the absence is complete. The same rhythm holds true on scales far beyond the human. Civilizations rarely crumble in a single night. The fall of Rome was not a single day's disaster, but centuries of unraveling, a slow loosening of threads that held an empire together until the tapestry finally tore. The Maya cities, once radiant with ceremony and story, emptied gradually, their plazas echoing with fewer footsteps until silence was all that remained. From the inside, these collapses did not appear as endings. They were life as usual, with only the faintest hints of decline. Yet from the vantage of centuries, they appear as sudden vanishing acts. What felt like continuity was the slow dusk before the dark. This is the paradox of endings. They unfold quietly, then arrive all at once. The earth beneath our feet holds countless examples of this pattern. An earthquake, for instance, is not born in the moment of rupture. It is prepared in silence, in the unseen pressure of tectonic plates grinding slowly against one another. For centuries or millennia, that pressure builds, without sound, without warning. Then, in an instant, the world shudders and breaks. What was invisible becomes undeniable. The stars follow this rhythm as well. They live for billions of years, consuming their fuel in steady silence. To us, their light feels eternal, fixed in the night sky. Yet, in time, their fuel wanes and their brightness falters. Then comes the sudden transformation, collapse into a white dwarf, or an explosion so luminous it outshines entire galaxies. A star dies slowly, invisibly, until it dies all at once. Even in our own intimate lives, this rhythm is present. Relationships rarely end in a single moment. They erode in silences, in misunderstandings, in words unspoken. Health fails in the same way. 1,000 small neglects and invisible shifts until, one day, the change is unmistakable. Our personal worlds, like the worlds of stars and civilizations, do not fall abruptly. They prepare their endings in quiet hours, in unnoticed days, before tipping suddenly into transformation. Why then are we so unprepared for endings? Perhaps it is because we live in the present, and the present always convinces us of its permanence. To acknowledge the gradual decay of things is uncomfortable. To notice impermanence is to face our own fragility. So, we lean on illusions. We tell ourselves that what is will continue to be, that the structures of our lives will remain, that tomorrow will resemble today. And yet, beneath the surface, the quiet accumulation of change is always underway. Time does not sever with a blade. It erodes like water on stone. We are worn down not by sudden moments, but by the endless patience of days. Civilizations breathe in the same way. They inhale with growth, with discovery, with conquest. They exhale with neglect, with overreach, with exhaustion. In the rhythm of that breath, decline is already written, though it is felt only dimly until the silence grows too deep to ignore. When a person dies, it is not simply in the instant of their final breath. It is in the long process of cells wearing down, organs tiring, the body surrendering. Yet, when the end comes, it feels abrupt. Eras, too, carry within them a heartbeat, and when that heartbeat ceases, we look back and call it collapse. But collapse is only the last note of a long song, already fading long before we recognized its quietness. And so we arrive at the heart of this meditation. Endings are the rhythm of existence. They arrive like shadows lengthening on the horizon, unseen until they stretch across the ground. They are part of the design, not failures of it. We may struggle to see this truth, but it surrounds us. The very ground beneath us is built from the sediments of former worlds. The oceans echo with the fossils of vanished creatures. The stars shine with light from long-dead suns. To live is to dwell amid endings already accomplished. This reflection, soft and steady, leads us toward the path the rest of this journey will follow. We will wander through the slow dissolutions of ancient worlds, the quiet extinctions of species, the fragile breaths of civilizations, and the final horizons of stars. Along the way, we will return again and again to this paradox, that endings are both gradual and sudden, both whisper and thunder. There is peace in recognizing this. To understand endings not as tragedies, but as continuations of the rhythm of time, is to feel the world differently. It allows us to let go of the fear that endings are unnatural. They are as natural as the rising of the tide, as the fading of light, as the drift into sleep. They are not interruptions, but passages. And so, as we begin, let us rest in the thought that endings need not be resisted. They are part of the great breathing of the universe, as essential as beginnings. Like people, eras end not with a single note, but with a quiet descent, and then, suddenly, with silence. To recognize this is not to despair, but to accept. And in that acceptance, we may find not sorrow but a strange kind of calm. Time does not move as a straight road, no matter how firmly our calendars and clocks try to convince us otherwise. It flows more like an ocean, swelling and receding, carrying us upon its tides. Some waves rise quickly and fall just as fast, like the span of a human breath. Others move with such patience that we can scarcely perceive them, cycles stretching across ages, shaping the world long before we notice their touch. To live is to drift upon these waters, sensing only the ripples while the vast tides unfold beyond our knowing. The earth itself keeps time in rhythms, both gentle and immense. Each day turns upon its axis, delivering us into light and then into shadow, a cycle so familiar we forget its miracle. Seasons tilt across the year, spring unfolding into summer, summer withering into autumn, autumn yielding to winter's stillness. Beyond what we can see in a lifetime, other cycles carry on in silence. The planet leans in its long precession, wobbling like a slow-spinning top across tens of thousands of years. Ice sheets advance and retreat in glacial breaths, covering continents, then withdrawing as though the earth inhales and exhales through epochs. None of this feels abrupt when lived from within, yet all of it shapes the fate of oceans, forests, and the civilizations that rise upon their shores. Within our own bodies, the same tides are mirrored, the rhythm of a heartbeat, the rise and fall of breath, the waxing and waning of energy as the day draws on. All echo the patterns of our planet and our sun. Sleep comes and goes with the turning of the earth, aligning us with the dance of day and night. Even the smallest creatures obey these rhythms. Flowers open with dawn and fold themselves at dusk. Birds migrate with seasons. The smallest cells pulse with circadian clocks, tiny gears turning within us that whisper the same truth. We are not separate from the rhythm of time. We are part of it, instruments playing in the same great orchestra. History, too, hums with cycles. Civilizations swell like tides, rising on waves of discovery and abundance, then waning in fatigue and neglect. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, each civilization had its golden age, its moment of fullness. Then came decline, not sudden but gradual, like the moon waning from fullness to a thin crescent. Corruption grows quietly. Resources thin, unnoticed. Traditions weaken across generations. For those living within it, life continues as though nothing has shifted. Only from a distance do we see the arc clearly, the tide rising, cresting, and then falling back into the sea. Beyond Earth, these rhythms extend into the cosmos. Stars live on scales so immense that their patience dwarfs our imagination. For billions of years, they burn steady and radiant, appearing eternal to us. Yet their light is only one phase of a greater cycle. A star brightens, matures, grows unstable, and eventually fades or collapses. Galaxies themselves spin and dance in cycles of birth and destruction, colliding and merging like great tides of light. Even the universe may hold its own rhythm, an expansion and contraction across spans of time so vast they elude comprehension. We live in a cosmos that breathes. And yet, despite all of this, humans cling to the image of a straight line. Our histories are drawn as timelines, our futures imagined as endless progress stretching forward. But nature does not move in straight lines. It circles, it spirals, it pulses. Our desire for the linear is a desire for permanence, for a direction that reassures us that what we know will carry on unchanged. But the truth is gentler and also more humbling. Everything returns, everything cycles, everything moves in tides. What we call sudden change is nearly always the crest of a long-hidden rhythm. The collapse of a city may appear abrupt in the telling, but it was seeded centuries earlier, in droughts, in famines, in overreaches too subtle to notice. The turning of an ice age may feel cataclysmic, but it was born in the slow accumulation of snowflakes, in shifts of orbit far beyond our perception. Every transformation begins quietly, gathering in stillness before revealing itself in its fullness. We drift in these tides, whether we recognize them or not. Our lives are ripples carried upon waves larger than ourselves, waves that began before we were born and will continue long after we are gone. To feel this is not to despair, but to find calm. For in recognizing the rhythms, we see that endings and beginnings are not separate. They are moments in the same tide, the fall of one wave giving rise to another. Time, then, is not a march but a breathing, not a line but a tide. To listen to it is to feel less alone. For just as the earth turns, the stars pulse, and the galaxies swirl, so too do we move in our own cycles of growth, decline, and renewal. The rhythm of time is vast, but it is also intimate, touching the beat of our hearts as surely as it shapes the fate of worlds. There is a silence that accompanies extinction, and it is never sudden in its beginnings. It begins quietly, with fewer footprints upon the soil, with fewer voices echoing across forests and plains. It begins with the absence of a single species of plant in one valley, or the thinning of a herd across a single plain. The unraveling of life is not abrupt. It is slow, delicate, and often invisible, until suddenly the silence is undeniable, and the world is altered forever. Across the history of Earth, extinction has been both ordinary and profound. Species vanish every day in subtle ways, disappearing without witness, their absence noted only in the fossil record or in the memory of ecosystems that shift to fill the void. Yet there are times when this ordinary rhythm is broken by cascades, when the slow decline accumulates into a sudden collapse, when endings move from whispers into thunder. The Earth has lived through at least 5 great mass extinctions, and in each, the pattern repeats. A long preparation in stillness, then an unraveling so abrupt it reshapes the destiny of life itself. The Permian extinction, sometimes called the Great Dying, was the most severe of all. For millions of years before its peak, climates shifted and seas grew unstable. Volcanic eruptions in Siberia released immense volumes of gas, poisoning oceans and skies. Life dwindled slowly, unseen at first, until, in a relatively brief geological instant, 90% of species disappeared. Coral reefs dissolved. Forests withered. Creatures that had thrived for ages found themselves unable to survive the new conditions. The silence that followed was nearly total. And yet, it had begun with small shifts, with subtle changes invisible to those living through them. The extinction of the dinosaurs carries the same duality of slowness and suddenness. For millions of years, their ecosystems had been changing. Volcanic activity darkened skies, climates fluctuated, and species numbers declined. Then came the asteroid, a single moment that transformed the Earth. A fiery impact, a shroud of dust, a sudden plunge into darkness. To us, it appears as if dinosaurs vanished overnight. But in truth, their world had already been weakening, preparing silently for its end. The asteroid was not the beginning of extinction, but the final punctuation mark in a story already long in the telling. Even outside the great cataclysms, extinctions move in this rhythm. The mammoths that once roamed Ice Age plains did not vanish in an instant. Their ranges shrank gradually, their numbers diminished year by year. For centuries, isolated populations lingered on small islands long after the larger herds had disappeared. To them, extinction was not sudden but drawn out, a thinning presence, like a candle flickering lower and lower until it finally went out. And today, within our own time, the same story unfolds around us. Species vanish in forests, in oceans, in deserts, often without our noticing. A bird's song grows rare in one valley, then disappears altogether. A reef loses one kind of coral, then another, until the entire ecosystem collapses into silence. Extinction is still moving in slow motion, just as it always has. To us, it may seem abrupt when we look back, but while we live within it, the decline passes as background, quiet and nearly invisible. There is a lesson in this, a sobering one. Endings often disguise themselves as continuity. We imagine that what surrounds us will endure because the change from one day to the next is so slight. The river still flows, the forest still stands, the birds still sing. But beneath that continuity, threads are loosening. Numbers dwindle. Connections weaken. Balance tilts. By the time the absence is undeniable, the unraveling has already been long underway. And yet, extinction is not only silence. It is also renewal. When the Great Dying ended, new life emerged to take the place of what was lost. The dominance of reptiles after the Permian extinction eventually gave rise to the age of dinosaurs. When the dinosaurs themselves vanished, mammals stepped into the emptied spaces, leading eventually to us. Extinction clears the stage, painfully and irrevocably, but it also makes way for new voices, new actors, new forms of life. From the perspective of a single species, extinction is tragedy. From the perspective of Earth, it is transformation. The silence that follows is only temporary. Slowly, patiently, life begins again, as though the planet itself breathes in after a long exhalation. What seems like an ending is also a beginning, though one measured in millions of years. To see extinction this way is to soften our fear of endings. It does not deny their sorrow or their gravity, but it places them within a rhythm larger than grief. Nothing vanishes entirely without leaving room for something new to take root. The slow decline, the sudden collapse, and the eventual renewal are all part of the same cycle, the same tide. Life on Earth has always moved in this pattern, and so have the stars, the civilizations, and even the moments of our own lives. Extinction teaches us to recognize both patience and impermanence, the patience of life to endure in the face of quiet decline, and the impermanence of even the most dominant forms. Dinosaurs, mammoths, trilobites, each one seemed permanent, unshakable, destined to endure forever. But permanence is an illusion, and endings are inevitable. To live within that truth is not to despair, but to recognize the fragile beauty of every moment of existence. Perhaps this is why the idea of extinction lingers so deeply in human imagination. It speaks to more than vanished species. It speaks to the fading of eras, to the vulnerability of our own world. We sense in it the echo of our own impermanence. Just as species disappear, so too will our civilizations, our structures, our memories. And just as life returns after extinctions, perhaps there is something beyond our endings as well, something that will carry forward in silence until it blooms again. Extinctions move slowly, then suddenly. They begin with whispers, with subtle absences, and they end with silence. But even in silence, the earth remembers. The rocks hold fossils. Civilizations end the way forests fall silent, the way stars fade from the sky. Rarely is their decline a single moment. It is a process spread across generations, so slow that those living through it scarcely notice, so quiet that the last breath is only recognized in hindsight. We imagine collapse as sudden catastrophe, cities burning, empires falling overnight. Yet history shows us otherwise. Civilizations echo as they fade. Their voices grow softer, their lights dimmer, their stories quieter, until at last what was once vast is only a whisper carried on the wind. The Sumerians, among the first to carve language into clay, did not know they were the beginning of something that would one day end. For centuries they built cities along rivers, raised temples to their gods, and told stories that still shape us. Yet drought thinned their harvests. Salts rose in their soil. Cities emptied, not overnight but slowly, like water draining from a vessel. One by one the voices left until only fragments remained, tablets buried in the earth, waiting to be found. The Maya, too, echo across time. Their pyramids still rise from the jungle canopy, their plazas still open to the sun. But where once there was music and ceremony, now there is only silence. Their cities did not fall in a single blow. Drought came in waves. Fields grew barren. People drifted away, searching for survival elsewhere. What remains is not a story of destruction, but of dispersal, a civilization dissolving like mist, leaving behind stones that still hold the memory of ceremony. Even Rome, often remembered as falling with fire and conquest, did not collapse in a single day. Its power thinned over centuries. Corruption deepened, economies weakened, loyalties fractured. Emperors rose and fell, borders shrank, legions dissolved. To those who lived through it, Rome's end must not have felt like collapse, but like a long twilight. Each year a little dimmer, each generation carrying less of the empire's former brilliance. And when the final fragments fell, what remained was already only an echo of the empire's full voice. The fall of civilizations is not always violent. Sometimes it is quiet neglect, a drifting away from the structures that once held people together. Libraries crumble when no one cares to preserve them. Roads dissolve when no one walks them. Languages fade when fewer children learn them. The death of a civilization can be as soft as forgetting, as gentle as silence spreading through places where once there was speech. What makes these echoes haunting is not only what is lost, but what is left behind. Ruins rise out of the earth like fragments of memory. Temples without worshippers, walls without inhabitants, plazas without footsteps. They are not silent, for they speak in their own way. They remind us that what feels eternal is fragile, that permanence is only an illusion. The pyramids, the ziggurats, the aqueducts, they stand as monuments not to eternity but to impermanence, proof that even greatness withers, even empires dissolve. Yet there is beauty in the echo. Civilizations may die, but they do not vanish completely. The knowledge of Sumer survives in the writing systems that followed. The philosophy of Greece lives in the thoughts we still ponder. The mathematics of the Maya still guides calendars. The architecture of Rome still arches above us in bridges and domes. Echoes carry on, softened but persistent, like a voice spoken across a canyon. The sound fades, but it does not disappear. To live within a civilization is to believe it will last forever. To wake each day to the rhythm of markets, of politics, of shared stories, is to imagine that this rhythm will continue without end. Yet the lesson of history is otherwise. Civilizations are as mortal as the people who build them. They carry within them the seeds of their own decline, unfolding too slowly to notice until the echo is all that remains. Perhaps this is why ruins affect us so deeply. When we walk through an abandoned city, when we stand among broken columns or gaze upon half-buried walls, we are reminded of our own impermanence. We feel both small and connected, humbled by the knowledge that even the grandest human endeavors become whispers. But there is also comfort. For in these echoes we see continuity, the persistence of memory, the endurance of meaning beyond collapse. Civilizations, like people, do not end in silence alone. They pass into others, shaping what comes next. Rome did not vanish completely. Its laws, its architecture, its stories carried into Europe, into Byzantium, into the world that followed. The Maya did not disappear. Their descendants live on, carrying fragments of language, ritual, and identity. Even in collapse, civilizations do not dissolve entirely. They echo into the future, threads woven into the next tapestry of human life. This is the rhythm of endings on the human scale. Civilizations rise, they flourish, they weaken, and they fall. Their decline is slow, nearly invisible, until suddenly the silence is complete. Yet the silence is never absolute. Always something carries forward, a word, a design, a memory. We walk upon the echoes of countless vanished worlds, each whispering to us that permanence is an illusion, that time moves quietly, then all at once. And so, when we imagine our own world, our cities lit at night, our towers of glass and steel, our technologies and networks, we may feel a sense of permanence. Yet history tells us otherwise. We, too, are an echo in the making, our voices carrying forward until they fade, leaving behind fragments for others to find. Civilizations do not die with a single sound. They fade, they echo, they become whispers. And in those whispers, the story of humanity continues. The climate is a breath, vast yet delicate, an invisible rhythm that carries life forward or pulls it back. To live upon the earth is to live inside this breath, even if we rarely notice it. It enfolds us as the atmosphere, invisible and constant, but never still. Winds move across oceans, rains fall upon mountains, temperatures shift with the seasons, and in these fluctuations, entire civilizations find their fate. The fragility of climate lies in its balance. Too much warmth, too little rain, too many storms, and life bends toward hardship. But when the rhythm is steady, when rains return on time and temperatures remain gentle, abundance blooms. Fields swell with grain, rivers rise and recede in predictable cycles, and people build their lives on the trust that nature will continue its quiet generosity. The Nile's dependable floods, for instance, gave ancient Egypt not only food but also faith, a rhythm of renewal that structured their entire worldview. Yet when the floods faltered, famine arrived like an unexpected guest, and the stability of dynasties weakened. So much of human history rests upon these invisible balances. The Sumerians irrigated their fields with the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates, confident in their ability to coax life from the soil. But over time, salts crept upward from over-irrigation. The land grew tired, less fertile, less giving. Harvests dwindled, and with them, the strength of their civilization. Climate was not a dramatic enemy. It was a slow eroder, a quiet underminer of abundance. The Maya, whose pyramids still rise from the jungles of Central America, depended on seasonal rains. Their cities were vast, their culture radiant, their knowledge of astronomy profound. Yet when the rains faltered, when years of drought strung themselves together, their reservoirs dried. Crops withered. The people dispersed. Their cities, once alive with music and ritual, became hushed. The silence of the Maya is a reminder that civilizations are not only undone by wars or conquests, but by the absence of rain, by the refusal of the sky to open. Even Rome, the great empire whose roads stretched across continents, whose legions marched in disciplined precision, felt the breath of climate shift. In its later centuries, waves of drought and cooling reshaped agriculture. Crops that once fed the empire weakened. People migrated, searching for food and stability. In those movements, Rome's cohesion strained. Climate was not the sole reason for its twilight, but it was a quiet current beneath the surface, pulling at the empire's foundations. What is striking about these stories is not only how fragile civilizations are to climate, but how invisible these changes can feel while they unfold. To those living in a drought year, it may seem only a temporary misfortune. To those enduring harsher winters or failing harvests, it may appear as chance. Only in the sweep of centuries does the pattern emerge, a gentle breath shifting, altering the trajectory of entire peoples. The rhythm of rainfall, the cycles of heat and cold, the unpredictable swings of drought and flood, all of these compose the hidden music to which humanity dances. The Earth's climate has always shifted. Ice ages advanced, covering lands in silence and snow, then retreated, leaving green valleys and rivers in their wake. These were not human scales of time, but planetary ones, slow enough to appear eternal, until they tipped suddenly, dramatically. Forests gave way to deserts. Deserts became seas. Entire ecosystems reformed, and with them, the possibilities of human life. We are inheritors of these changes, the beneficiaries of a relatively stable climate that allowed agriculture to emerge, societies to grow, and stories to endure. Yet the fragility remains. A small tilt in temperature, a shift in rainfall, and the conditions we depend upon can unravel. The balance is not guaranteed. The atmosphere is sensitive, like a skin stretched thin across the world. It responds not only to natural rhythms, but to human influence. Fires that burn forests, gases released from our machines, oceans warming as they absorb our excess heat. All of this adds to the quiet breath of climate, altering its rhythm. To reflect on climate is to recognize both its gentleness and its power. Gentle because its changes often arrive slowly, unnoticed, like shadows moving across a room. Powerful because, over centuries, these shadows reshape entire civilizations, undoing empires, redrawing maps, scattering peoples. The breath of climate is not something we control. It is something we live within, something we negotiate with, something we must learn to listen to if we wish to remain. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson carried by the ruins of past civilizations, that human endurance depends not only on our own ingenuity, but on our ability to adapt to a breath larger than ourselves. The Nile, the rains, the rivers, the soils, they are not mere resources, but partners in our existence. When we exhaust them, when we ignore their limits, they withdraw. And in that withdrawal, we hear again the silence of decline. Yet within this fragility is also a profound beauty. For to live in a world shaped by climate is to live in rhythm with the earth itself. To feel rain upon the skin, to hear the winds in the trees, to breathe the air warmed by sunlight. All of this reminds us that we are not separate from the breath of climate, but born from it. Our stories, our civilizations, our futures are written not only in the words we carve or the buildings we raise, but in the sky above, in the air we breathe, in the balance of warmth and coolness that cradles us. The climate is a breath, and like all breaths, it can falter, it can quicken, it can change. The fragility is not something to fear, but something to understand. For in that understanding lies the possibility of harmony, of listening more deeply to the quiet rhythms that sustain us. And if we do not listen, history shows us the echo that follows. Civilizations fading, voices silenced, worlds undone, not by sudden catastrophe, but by a breath that shifted quietly, then all at once. The earth has known great stillnesses, seasons of frozen silence, when ice claimed the land and the world seemed to pause. These were the ice ages, epochs where glaciers descended from the poles, creeping like vast white rivers across continents, grinding mountains into dust and burying valleys beneath unyielding cold. To imagine such a world is to imagine a kind of planetary sleep, a long exhale of frost, a retreat into silence where life bent itself into new shapes just to endure. For hundreds of thousands of years, these cycles of ice advanced and retreated, not in the rhythm of human generations, but in the deep patience of geological time. Forests withered under the weight of glaciers. Animals migrated southward or adapted into forms built for cold, their coats thick, their bodies heavy. Human beings, fragile and new, found themselves shaped by this relentless freeze. Fire became not only warmth, but survival. Shelters carved from stone and bone became lifelines. In the face of ice, humanity learned resilience, learned community, learned to endure long winters that stretched beyond memory. It is striking to realize that our species was born into a world of shifting ice. Civilization, with its cities and stories, is a recent bloom, a gift of the relative warmth of the last 10,000 years. Before that, the Earth was a place of glaciers and permafrost, where survival was not about building empires, but simply finding the next meal, the next shelter, the next generation. To live in such a world was to live at the mercy of forces vast and impersonal, to carry the humility of knowing that the earth itself could retreat into silence without notice. The glaciers were sculptors. They carved valleys into the familiar shapes we see today. The fjords of Norway, the Great Lakes of North America, the smooth U-shaped valleys of the Alps, all are signatures of the ice's slow hand. In their retreat, the glaciers left fertile soils carried by rivers of meltwater, spreading richness across plains. The very lands that now feed millions were once scoured by silence and frost. In this way, even destruction was also creation, a paradox that whispers through geological time, that endings can be beginnings, that silence can give birth to abundance. The fragility of climate is written in these icy chapters. The Earth's tilt, its orbit around the sun, the faint variations in how it receives light. These were enough to trigger ages of snow and ice or to release them into warmth. Life depended not only on adaptation but on patience, waiting through the slow breath of planetary time. The mammoths and the mastodons, the giant ground sloths and saber-toothed cats, thrived in those glacial expanses, yet most are now gone, their survival caught in the shifting tide between cold and warmth. When the ice began to retreat some 12,000 years ago, the world opened in ways that shaped everything to come. Rivers swelled from the melting glaciers, carving new channels and flooding new plains. Forests returned where once there had been tundra. Animals spread into fresh pastures. Humanity, freed from the narrow demands of survival, began to plant seeds, to settle, to dream of permanence. Agriculture was born not in the heart of the ice, but in its absence. Our stories, our philosophies, our cities, all rest on the fragile interlude of warmth that followed the long silence. Yet the memory of ice lingers. It lingers in our myths, in tales of floods and frozen worlds, in the quiet, all we feel at the sight of mountains crowned with snow. It lingers in the cautionary lessons etched into stone and soil, that the earth does not promise stability, that its breaths are long, and that what seems eternal may change with the turning of a cycle too vast for us to see. The long sleep of ice also reminds us of scale. For what are centuries compared to millennia? What are civilizations compared to glaciers? The pyramids of Egypt, the temples of Angkor, the towers of New York, all of them are but moments in the vast turning of the Earth's climate. Ice came before them, and in some form may come again after them. In this perspective, the fragility of our endeavors becomes clear. They are not carved into eternity, but built in the brief warmth between frosts. And yet there is beauty in this impermanence. For just as the ice ages sculpted valleys and lakes, so too they sculpted us. They taught our ancestors to endure hardship, to gather in community, to kindle light against the dark. They gave us the tools of resilience, the patience to wait for seasons to change, the wisdom to recognize that life is always lived in negotiation with forces larger than ourselves. The silence of the ice was not emptiness, but a teacher. Perhaps that is why glaciers, even now, inspire such reverence. To stand before them is to feel time made visible, to see centuries stacked in layers of frozen blue. They remind us of the Earth's breath, slow and immense, unconcerned with our urgencies. They remind us that fragility and strength coexist. Ice is both delicate and unyielding, both melting at the touch and powerful enough to carve mountains. The long sleep of ice whispers of endings, yes, but also of cycles. For the earth has always turned between warmth and cold, between abundance and silence. To know this is not to despair, but to awaken into humility. Our time, our civilizations, our warmth, they are gifts of the current interlude. They are fragile, fleeting, but no less meaningful for their impermanence. In fact, it is their impermanence that makes them precious. The glaciers have receded for now, retreating to the poles, to the high mountains. But they remain watchful, their presence a reminder of the Earth's memory. And if one day they return, descending once more in silence, perhaps humanity will again find itself tested, not in its ambition, but in its capacity to endure. The ice is both past and future, both silence and creation. It is the breath of the earth, drawn long and deep, waiting in patience beyond the span of our civilizations. The oceans have always been the earth's vast library, keeping records not in paper or stone, but in currents, sediments, and salt. They are not silent in the way ice is silent, yet their voice is low, eternal, a murmur that spans epochs. To listen to the sea is to listen to memory itself, a memory fluid and unbroken, carrying the echoes of every era that has come before. Beneath their shifting surfaces, the oceans cradle the remnants of lives long gone. The shells of ancient creatures settle into layers of seabed, pressed by time into limestone. Microscopic plankton, flourishing in numbers beyond comprehension, fall like snow to the deep, recording with each deposit the climate of their moment. Coral reefs rise and collapse, leaving skeletons of vanished cities beneath the waves. Even extinction is not erased in the ocean. It becomes part of the sediment, part of the quiet chronicle that tells the story of what once was. Scientists speak of the ocean as a climate regulator, a great lung of the planet, a heat sink that swallows excess warmth. But to think of the sea only as mechanism is to miss its deeper poetry. The oceans are memory because they hold continuity. They connect past to present with a constancy that mountains cannot. For mountains crumble and glaciers melt, but the sea remains, changing only in form. The same waters that once cradled trilobites now cradle us. The same tides that rose against ancient shores still rise against ours. The ocean is not just history, it is persistence. And yet, like memory itself, the sea is layered. At the surface, waves dance in light, reflecting the sky's moods. But far below, in the abyssal depths where no sunlight reaches, the ocean keeps its darkest archives. There, in silence and pressure, lie secrets of the earth that have never been read. Hydrothermal vents belch minerals that feed alien ecosystems of blind shrimp and sulfur-breathing bacteria, creatures untouched by the rise and fall of civilizations above. These are reminders that life is not fragile everywhere, that in places far removed from the warmth of the sun, persistence takes on forms we cannot imagine. The oceans have borne witness to endings vast and final. When the great Permian extinction unfolded some 252 million years ago, when more than 90% of species perished, the seas themselves became toxic, depleted of oxygen, filled with poisonous blooms. The water that had been cradle turned coffin. And yet, after silence, life returned. From devastation came new forms, new experiments, new voices in the symphony of existence. The ocean remembered the loss, but it also remembered how to heal. This duality, cradle and grave, is what makes the sea so haunting. It is where life began, where the first cells found rhythm in tides, where the first vertebrates tested their fins. But it is also where so many lives ended, preserved only as fossils pressed into seabeds. Every ripple that touches the shore carries some whisper of both beginnings and endings. To stand at the edge of the ocean is to be reminded that all things return, that memory itself is fluid, that nothing vanishes entirely. Even human stories are bound to the sea. The first sailors looked to the horizon and found both fear and possibility. Entire cultures arose from the patterns of tides, from the migrations of fish, from the maps drawn in starlight and wave. The ocean was both barrier and bridge, a vastness that separated and yet connected civilizations. To cross it was to risk oblivion. To master it was to expand the known world. In this sense, the ocean remembers us too, in shipwrecks scattered across its floor, in artifacts swallowed by waves, in myths of floods and drowned cities. But what is most humbling is not the ocean's memory of us, but its indifference. We may carve harbors, sail ships, net its fish, or even alter its chemistry with our exhaust, but the ocean's memory stretches too far back to be defined by us alone. It remembers creatures with no names, landscapes long submerged, skies filled with stars we will never see again. To the ocean, we are a moment, a ripple, perhaps even a forgettable one. And yet, that forgettability is strangely consoling. It tells us that we too are part of a greater continuity, that what we add to the sea will not be lost, but folded into its infinite record. There is a deep calm in knowing that memory does not require permanence. We often imagine memory as something fragile, something that must be preserved at all costs, but the ocean teaches otherwise. Memory is not about perfect preservation, but about layering, transformation, continuity. Just as waves erase footprints in the sand, but not the tide itself, so too the ocean keeps the essence of what has been, not the details. It is a memory, both merciful and unrelenting. Perhaps that is why so many people standing at the shore feel a peculiar mixture of smallness and solace. The ocean tells us that eras end, that civilizations, like coral reefs, rise and collapse, that species, like waves, crest and vanish. And yet the tide continues, memory flows onward, life returns in forms we could never have imagined. The sea's song is not one of despair, but of continuity, that endings are woven into beginnings, that nothing is truly lost, only transformed. In the end, the ocean's memory humbles us not because it is vast, but because it is patient. It does not need to rush. It does not need to cling. It simply holds. And in that holding, it carries both silence and song, both death and life. The ocean is the Earth's oldest witness, and it will continue to remember long after our own stories are whispers lost to time. Beneath our feet, hidden beneath stone and ocean, lies a restless fire. We walk on solid ground and imagine it permanent, but permanence is an illusion. The crust we trust is a thin shell, a fragile skin stretched across a body of heat and molten stone. Beneath it, the earth is alive in a way both unsettling and beautiful. Its heart a furnace, its breath a slow exhalation of magma and steam. This fire is ancient. It is the remnant of Earth's birth, the lingering warmth of collisions so violent that stone melted and worlds formed. Added to this are the subtle gifts of radioactivity, atoms splitting quietly in darkness, their decay releasing heat that has burned without pause for billions of years. The Earth, for all its surface stillness, is a planet of fire in disguise. We live on a glowing ember, wrapped in a thin blanket of stone. Volcanoes are the places where this hidden truth rises to meet us. They remind us that the earth is never truly at rest. To stand near one is to stand in the presence of both destruction and creation. Lava flows bury forests, erase towns, silence rivers. Yet the same flows cool into new land, rich with minerals, fertile for future growth. Every eruption is an ending and a beginning, woven together, a cycle as old as the planet itself. The great basalt plains, black and endless, tell of eruptions so vast they reshaped climates and marked boundaries between eras. Some floods of lava released enough gas and ash to choke the sky, altering the course of evolution. The Earth's fire has both nurtured and extinguished life, has given continents their form, and then broken them apart. We are taught to think of eras as measured by fossils, but often they are also measured by fire. And beneath the ocean, unseen, this fire burns just as fiercely. Along the mid-ocean ridges, new crust is born every day, magma welling up from deep reservoirs, solidifying into basalt. The seafloor spreads slowly, carrying continents with it, rearranging the map of the world over millions of years. Entire mountain ranges exist, hidden below waves, testimony to the ceaseless work of the Earth's interior. What we think of as fixed, the position of land, the outlines of coastlines, is only temporary. The fire beneath ensures that nothing remains as it was. Yet, for all its violence, the fire is also patient. It moves in cycles far longer than our lives, longer than civilizations, even longer than species. A volcano may slumber for centuries before awakening. A continent may drift only a few centimeters each year, yet across eons, oceans open and close, mountains rise and crumble, worlds transform. The fire beneath is both destroyer and slow sculptor. It does not rush. It has all the time in the world. There is a paradox here, one that mirrors our own existence. We fear endings. We fear collapse. And yet, it is collapse that allows creation. Without volcanic ash, soils would be barren. Without shifting plates, life would not be recycled into new forms. Without the fire within, the earth itself would be a dead stone. Without change, without renewal. The same fire that has ended eras has also given life its second chances. Even myths across cultures have sensed this dual nature. Fire is always more than element. It is spirit, force, hunger. For the Greeks, it was Prometheus' gift, stolen from the gods, both savior and curse. In Polynesian stories, volcanoes are homes of deities, fiery guardians who shape islands from the sea. In Japan, Mount Fuji is not only mountain but goddess, her eruptions seen as expressions of will. These myths recognize what science also tells us. The fire is not passive. It is agency itself. It is the earth reminding us that we are guests upon its surface. And so, eras have died by fire as surely as by ice or sea. The Siberian traps, vast fields of lava unleashed over hundreds of thousands of years, likely brought about the most devastating extinction of all, the Permian. The air filled with ash and sulfur, oceans warmed, oxygen dwindled, ecosystems unraveled. Nearly all life perished, not by comet or flood, but by the slow and relentless breath of the earth itself. In that firestorm, one age ended and another began. Yet fire has also birthed some of the most resilient landscapes we know. The Hawaiian Islands, isolated in the Pacific, are the children of an undersea hotspot that has burned for millions of years. From bare volcanic rock grew forests, birds, and cultures. From fire came beauty, diversity, story. To look at Hawaii is to see the paradox embodied. The same force that can erase worlds can also create them anew. What then do we learn from the fire beneath the crust? Perhaps that endings are not only sudden cataclysms, but also the slow burning of transformation. Perhaps that eras do not simply die. They melt, they fracture, they smolder into something else. Perhaps that we too, as part of this planet, are shaped not only by what is gentle and life-giving, but also by what is fierce and consuming. There is comfort, strangely, in knowing that this fire will outlast us. Long after our species is gone, long after our cities are rubble and our monuments dust, the Earth's heart will continue to burn. Volcanoes will still rise, continents will still drift, oceans will still spread and close. The fire will carry memory in its own way, not as fossils or sediments, but as landscapes transformed, as scars upon the planet's skin. And when the Earth itself, in the distant future, is consumed by the swelling sun, when its seas boil away and its crust melts into oblivion, the fire will not be extinguished suddenly. It will fade as it began, a slow cooling, a final exhalation. Even then, the memory of fire will linger, written into the stones of space, into the fragments that drift across the void. For now, though, we live above it, fragile beings on a restless surface. And perhaps the lesson of the fire beneath the crust is this: to recognize that destruction and creation are not opposites, but companions, that endings are beginnings in disguise, that to burn is also to renew. The earth is never silent. Even when fire sleeps beneath stone, the air above is always moving. Wind is the planet's restless whisper, an invisible river that flows without ceasing, sculpting landscapes, shaping climates, carrying the very seeds of life. To feel the wind is to feel the earth breathing. Unlike fire, which erupts in sudden violence, wind is both gentle and unrelenting. A single gust may scatter leaves across a quiet path, while the steady push of trade winds has carried ships across oceans, empires into contact, and ideas from shore to shore. Wind is at once delicate and immense. It can caress, and it can flatten. It can be lullaby or devastation. From the smallest eddies that stir dust in a courtyard to the titanic cyclones that span oceans, wind is born from contrasts. From the uneven heating of the earth by the sun, warm air rises, cool air sinks, and the planet's rotation twists these flows into patterns both chaotic and strangely ordered. In this way, the sky becomes a restless tapestry of motion. Every breeze we feel is a thread in that fabric, woven by forces both immediate and cosmic. Over deep time, wind has been more than weather. It has been architect. Deserts like the Sahara are sculpted by it, dunes rolling like frozen waves. Rock formations are carved into arches and spires, records of eons of abrasion. Even mountains, though born of stone and fire, are worn down grain by grain as winds grind their peaks into sand. Wind erases, but it also creates, redistributing dust into fertile soils, carrying minerals across continents, making life possible in places far removed from their source. Dust itself tells a story of wind's memory. Grains lifted from the Sahara cross the Atlantic, feeding the Amazon's rainforest. Ash from volcanic eruptions drifts across hemispheres, cooling summers or painting sunsets crimson. Even the pollen of ancient forests has been carried aloft, preserved in sediments, giving us records of climates long gone. Wind is the great messenger of time, carrying whispers of one world to another. It is also the courier of endings. Storms have toppled civilizations. Winds laden with drought once withered crops, turning fields to dust bowls, scattering communities in search of survival. In some eras, the shifting of wind patterns marked the collapse of entire cultures, like the ancestral Puebloans of the American Southwest or the decline of the Indus Valley civilization. Climate is not a backdrop to history. It is its stage, and wind has often been the silent playwright. Yet for all its violence, wind is also life-giver. The very act of pollination, of reproduction for countless plants, depends upon it. Seeds drift on air currents to find new soil. Birds and insects ride invisible pathways to migrate across continents. Even human lungs are tied to the rhythm of wind, for every breath we take is not ours alone. It is a momentary borrowing from the great cycle of air that circulates ceaselessly, shared by forests, oceans, and all living things. In myth, wind has always been a spirit. It is the breath of gods, the sigh of the earth, the voice of ancestors. In Greek tradition, the four anemoi were personifications of directional winds. Boreas, the cold north; Notus, the stormy south; Eurus, the east, bringer of change; and Zephyrus, the gentle west, herald of spring. For the Navajo, wind is life itself, entering the body at birth and departing at death. In Japanese tradition, Fujin, the god of wind, carries it in a great sack, releasing it to shape the world. Cultures have sensed what science confirms. Wind is never only movement of air, but a force of transformation. In eras past, winds have carried not only seeds, but also omens of extinction. Dust storms marked transitions of climate. Sudden shifts in monsoon patterns brought famine to ancient kingdoms. Even ice ages began and ended, in part, due to the dance of wind and ocean as air currents altered the distribution of heat across the globe. What seems ephemeral, a gust, a breeze, a storm, is part of a cycle that can end ages and begin new ones. And yet, like fire, wind holds contradiction. It is at once destroyer and preserver. Without wind, the seas would stagnate, forests would suffocate, weather would cease. Without wind, the planet's surface would be a dead calm, barren of change, devoid of renewal. Its presence may frighten us in the howl of a hurricane, but its absence would be far more terrifying. A world without breath, without rhythm, without song. The sound of wind, too, carries memory. The sigh through reeds along a riverbank, the whistling across mountain passes, the roar through skyscraper canyons. All are voices of the same force, modulated by the landscapes it encounters. Ancient people listened to the wind as message. Modern instruments measure it as data. But in both, there is recognition that it speaks, that it tells us something about the state of the earth, about the balance of heat and cold, land and sea, life and death. When eras end, wind is often the final witness. It scatters the ashes of forests burned in fire. It drifts over seas newly risen, carrying the salt of drowned valleys. It sweeps across barren plains where life once thrived, whispering over bones buried in sand. And when eras begin anew, it carries the first seeds into those same places, germinating futures from the debris of pasts. Wind is the continuity that links what has been with what will be. To stand in a quiet field at dusk and feel the evening breeze is to touch something eternal. That same air once brushed the wings of pterosaurs, once filled the lungs of mammoths, once swirled through forests that no longer exist. The breath of now is stitched with the breath of all who came before. Every gust carries more than temperature and speed. It carries memory, continuity, the shared pulse of the living earth. Perhaps that is why wind calms us, even when fierce. It is a reminder. We too are part of the circulation. We too are carried, scattered, shaped, erased. Eras, like people, breathe. They inhale beginnings, exhale endings. And the wind, steady, invisible, eternal, is their sigh, their voice, their messenger. Silence has a weight. It is not merely the absence of sound, but a presence of its own, heavy and palpable, like air before a storm. Across the deep corridors of time, eras do not always end in thunder. Often, they fade into quiet, into a stillness that lingers like held breath. Extinctions, when we look closely, rarely fall in a single moment. They are not always explosions or catastrophes in the way our imagination paints them. More often, they are slow dwindlings, losses that accumulate grain by grain until the world no longer resembles what it once was. In this way, silence is both symptom and signal. It is the hollow left when voices grow fewer, when songs of birds no longer fill the canopy, when reefs fall quiet without the chatter of their myriad inhabitants. The silence before extinction is not empty, but subdued. It is the hush of a forest thinned of its diversity, the muffled quiet of seas where great migrations no longer pass. It is not silence as in peace, but silence as in absence. The difference is profound. Peaceful silence rests upon wholeness, upon life at balance. Extinction silence is the thinning out, the unraveling of connections, until the very soundscape of Earth is diminished. Imagine the end of the great Pleistocene megafauna. Before the mammoth herds vanished, their numbers dwindled. The thundering sound of thousands moving together became the faint tread of a few isolated survivors. The trumpeting calls, once echoing across valleys, grew less frequent. Long before the final mammoth fell, the soundscape had already grown thin. The end began with quiet. The same is true of the oceans. Before industrial fishing, seas thrummed with life. Whales sang in great choirs. Shoals of fish moved in living currents, flashing in the sunlight like liquid mirrors. Coral reefs were filled with sound, the crackle of shrimp, the hum of countless creatures hidden among branches of coral. As populations fell, the ocean grew quieter. Scientists now measure this silence. Reefs without fish, without shrimp, without chatter, are acoustically still. The silence speaks louder than any storm. Even mass extinctions, those great upheavals where much of life vanished in a geologic instant, had their preludes of silence. Before the asteroid impact that ended the age of dinosaurs, ecosystems were already stressed, species already fading. The last songs of some creatures had ended long before the sky burned. When fire and ash finally came, it silenced what little remained. The catastrophe was sudden, but its silence began earlier. Silence is not absence of life alone, but absence of continuity. It is the breaking of pattern, the vanishing of rhythm. A rainforest stripped of its insects falls silent not only in sound, but in process. Pollination ceases, decay slows, cycles halt. Silence becomes a kind of paralysis. A system once alive with exchanges of energy grows mute, like an orchestra missing its instruments. And yet, silence is seductive. It can appear peaceful, even serene. The stillness of a lake emptied of fish is tranquil to the eye. The quiet of a sky emptied of migrating birds seems calm to the ear. But these are deceptive silences. They mask decline. They are not the stillness of balance, but of loss. The danger lies in mistaking absence for calm. In human histories, too, silence marks endings. Cities abandoned to drought do not collapse in an instant. They fade as voices leave, as streets grow empty, as songs and laughter, once carried on the wind, no longer echo through walls. The silence of ruins is a continuation of this long departure. Before walls crumble, sound vanishes. Before stone falls, voices fall silent. There is also the silence of anticipation, the strange hush before disaster strikes. Animals sense it. Birds stop singing before a storm. Forests grow still before wildfire spreads. Even we, without quite knowing, feel the weight of air change before calamity. Silence can be omen. It gathers, heavy and tense, before it breaks. This quiet is not only ecological or physical, but also existential. To contemplate extinction is to confront the silence of absence, the possibility of a future where human voices no longer rise, where cities no longer hum, where even memory ceases. Silence stretches beyond sound into meaning itself. Without hearers, without tellers, silence becomes absolute. And yet, paradoxically, silence can hold life. From stillness, renewal often begins. Seeds germinate in quiet soil. Oceans recover in silence when given rest from engines and nets. Forests regrow in the hush after fields are left fallow. Silence, then, is not only ending but also threshold. It is both erasure and potential, the liminal pause between what was and what may come. The silence before extinction is not the end itself, but the space where endings gather momentum. It is the breath drawn before exhale. It is the dimming before dark. To recognize it is to recognize fragility, to understand that loss is not always dramatic, but often subtle, quiet, cumulative. Perhaps that is why silence unsettles us. We are creatures of sound, of heartbeat, of voice, of breath. To lose these is to lose not only others, but ourselves. The silence of extinction, whether of one species or many, is a silence that reverberates within us, because we, too, are part of that chorus. Our own voices are woven into the soundscape of Earth, and without the others, even our songs diminish. Thus, when eras end, they may not collapse in fire or flood, but in quiet, in the slow vanishing of sound, in the fading of songs, in the weight of air too empty of life. Eras die like people, quietly, first in whispers, in absences, in silences, before they die all at once. Greatness rarely ends in an instant. Giants do not vanish in a single breath, though history often remembers them that way. Their stories are instead stretched across centuries or millennia, unraveling thread by thread until only a shadow remains. When we look closer, we see that the end of giants is not a fall, but a long fade. Take the dinosaurs, for example, creatures whose very name means terrible lizard, though they were more wondrous than terrible. We imagine their age ended in a single day, an asteroid falling from the heavens with the force of countless nuclear weapons. The firestorm, the darkness, the starvation, all consuming, all at once. But paleontology reveals another truth. Even before the skies blazed, many groups of dinosaurs had already been thinning out. Climate was shifting, ecosystems straining, chains of food and survival bending under unseen stress. By the time the asteroid struck, they were already in decline. The great impact sealed their fate, but the long fade had begun earlier, quietly, unseen except in the dwindling of species diversity, in the smaller herds, in the narrowing range of their voices. Or consider the mammoths. They did not vanish the moment humans appeared, nor in a single sweep of ice retreat. For thousands of years after their supposed extinction, small pockets of mammoths still walked the earth. On Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean, a population of dwarfed mammoths survived until just 4,000 years ago. When Egypt was building its pyramids, mammoths still roamed, shaggy relics of another age. They dwindled not in flame or thunder, but in silence, in isolation. Their numbers too few, their genes too tangled, their range too narrow. They faded like an old song repeated too many times, notes growing faint until only a whisper remained. Civilizations, too, follow this rhythm. We are tempted to speak of the fall of Rome as though an empire spanning centuries collapsed in a single dramatic moment. But Rome did not fall in one day. It unraveled slowly, institutions corroding, resources draining, armies weakening, citizens disillusioned. The Western Roman Empire lingered long after its glory had faded, reduced to fragments and echoes of its former might. In truth, Rome did not end in a fall, but in a fade, becoming something unrecognizable before it finally ceased. The same can be said of the Maya, of Angkor, of countless others whose ruins stand as monuments not to sudden collapse, but to gradual waning. This pattern, the long fade, seems almost universal. Giants do not vanish at once because their greatness carries momentum. Life, once established in abundance, does not yield easily. Even when pressure builds, decline is drawn out, slowed by inertia, stretched across time. It is like a great fire dwindling into embers. The blaze may end, but the warmth lingers, the glow persists, until finally even that, too, dies. There is something profoundly human in this recognition. We, too, feel the long fade in our own lives. Aging is not a collapse, but a soft retreat, a slow giving way. Vibrancy diminishes gradually, strength thins, memory blurs. Endings for individuals mirror endings for species, for empires, for eras. Rarely do they come all at once, without warning. More often, they creep in stages, and we call it time. The long fade carries lessons. It reminds us that endings are rarely obvious when we live through them. Dinosaurs did not know they were fading. Mammoths did not know they were in their twilight. Romans did not know their empire was unraveling. Life within an age feels normal, even as decline advances. It is only later, in hindsight, that the shape of the ending is clear. The present always feels solid, even when it is already slipping into history. But there is a gentleness, too, in the long fade. It grants continuity, a chance for life to adapt, for cultures to transform, for memory to preserve what is lost. Dinosaurs faded, but in their place birds rose, their descendants still singing in our skies. Mammoths dwindled, but their memory lingers in the elephants that walk the savannas. Rome declined, but in its long fade seeds of Europe were planted, languages evolved, faiths spread, ideas carried forward. Even as giants vanish, their echoes shape what comes after. The fade is not erasure, but transition. And yet, there is melancholy in this slowness. To watch something once mighty diminish is to confront fragility, to see how even the grandest are not immune to time. The long fade is like watching a sunset, beautiful, lingering, drawn out, but undeniably an ending. The horizon swallows the light gradually, until night takes hold. Perhaps we, too, are in a long fade. Some scientists wonder whether humanity has already passed its peak, whether in biodiversity, in climate stability, in cultural cohesion. We may not notice the fading while living it. The lights are still on, the cities still hum, the air still fills with voices. But perhaps, like Rome, like mammoths, we are already unwinding, already fading in ways that will be clear only in retrospect. The thought is sobering, and yet not without dignity. To fade is not to fail. To fade is to belong to time. In this sense, the long fade of giants is not tragedy alone, but rhythm. It is the music of impermanence, the way everything great softens before it is gone. No life form, no civilization, no moment escapes it. The fade is universal, and in its inevitability, it carries a strange comfort. We are not alone in our decline. We are part of the same arc that carried dinosaurs, mammoths, and empires into silence. So we remember them, not just their might, but their fading. The last mammoth on Wrangel Island, small and isolated, drinking from Arctic streams under the glow of northern lights. The final Roman senators, still dressing in togas, still speaking of empire even as their world shrank to shadows. The last dinosaur eggs, laid in a trembling world, hatchlings stepping into forests already altered beyond their ancestors' recognition. These images remind us that greatness is not only in flourishing but also in persistence, in lingering even as the world turns against you. Eras die like people, quietly first, then all at once. But in the long fade there is time to listen, to remember, to carry forward the resonance of what was. When an era ends, the silence is not immediately filled. There is always a pause, a gap, a breath between ages. The earth inhales, holds, and waits. It is in this breath that the world feels empty, and yet it is in this emptiness that the conditions for the next chapter are prepared. The fossil record reveals this rhythm again and again. After the Devonian extinction, when the oceans grew oxygen poor and vast coral reefs crumbled, there followed a long hush in evolutionary creativity. Life did not rebound instantly, it hesitated. Entire lineages vanished, and for millions of years, new forms appeared slowly, cautiously, as though the earth itself needed time to remember how to create abundance. After the Great Permian extinction, when more than 90% of all marine life and 70% of land species perished, there was a silence so vast it is sometimes called Earth's Great Dying. The world was barren, landscapes stripped of complexity, seas emptied of their richness. For millions of years after, the Earth seemed to wait. Only gradually did small survivors, modest reptiles, early ancestors of mammals, seed ferns, begin to spread. These pauses are not absence, but preparation. Just as soil needs time to recover after fire, just as silence is needed between notes to shape music, the earth uses its pauses to reset, to clear space. Without them, new life could not find room to grow. After the Great Dying came the age of the dinosaurs. After the dinosaurs' decline, the age of mammals. Each pause is both an ending and an opening, the deep breath before a new voice enters the song. We often imagine time as a continuous stream, but it is also punctuated. Eras do not flow seamlessly into each other. They stumble, they falter, they halt. This halting is not weakness, but rhythm. The same rhythm that gives structure to waves, to seasons, to breathing itself. Without the pause between exhalation and inhalation, breath would not exist. Without the stillness between heartbeats, circulation would not flow. On every scale, life is built not only from motion, but from rest. Civilizations follow this same law. When Rome receded, Europe entered centuries often called the Dark Ages, not truly dark, but quieter, more fragmented, stripped of the scale and grandeur that had defined empire. It was a breath in which old structures dissolved, allowing new languages, cultures, and ways of living to form. The Renaissance, the flowering of new thought and art, did not come in spite of the silence, but because of it. The breath between ages provided space for seeds to take root. We might resist these pauses. To human eyes, silence often looks like failure. We crave continuity, the illusion of steady progress. But the earth does not move only forward. It moves in cycles, in waves, in expansions and contractions. What feels like stagnation may be gestation. What feels like loss may be renewal hidden in shadow. There is poetry in imagining the earth breathing, each extinction an exhale, each recovery an inhale. With each breath, something vanishes and something new appears. It is a rhythm that is not rushed. The Earth's lungs expand across millions of years, its heartbeat measured not in seconds, but in epochs. What feels like stillness to us is motion to the planet. What feels like emptiness is simply the pause before the next beginning. And so, after the long fade of giants, there is not immediately a new roar, but a whisper of small things. Insects buzzing, ferns creeping, small mammals scurrying in shadows. These are the first notes after silence, fragile and tentative. Over time, they grow bolder, building harmonies, weaving the next age. But the whisper always comes first. It must. A symphony cannot begin without the soft stirrings that announce it. This rhythm carries a lesson for us. We live in a time when change feels relentless, when every day is filled with noise, pressure, urgency. We fear pauses as wasted time, silence as emptiness, stillness as death. But perhaps the earth teaches us otherwise. Pauses are not absence, they are part of the rhythm. Without them, there can be no renewal. Without them, growth suffocates under its own weight. On the grandest scale, the breath between ages is a reminder that endings are not the end of time itself. Even after devastation, life waits, then returns. Even after silence, voices rise again. This truth has held through 5 great extinctions, through countless collapses of civilizations, through the fading of species we thought eternal. Each time, the earth inhaled, exhaled, and began again. Perhaps we are living in such a breath now. Scientists speak of a 6th extinction, of ecosystems fraying, of species vanishing at rates unseen in human history. Perhaps the earth is exhaling again, emptying, preparing. From within the age of loss, it is hard to imagine what comes after. But if the rhythm holds, there will be a pause, and then, one day, something new will rise in the space we leave behind. Whether humanity is part of that rising or only its memory, we cannot know. What we can know is that the earth will breathe again. This realization softens the fear of endings. The breath between ages tells us that silence is not final. It is the prelude to renewal, the emptiness that makes space for fullness. Just as sleep makes space for waking, just as winter makes space for spring, extinction makes space for evolution. Death makes space for life. To listen to the breath between ages is to accept that even when the world feels emptied, it is not abandoned. Even when the stage is bare, the next actors are waiting in the wings. The curtain has not fallen forever, it is only paused. The earth does not end. It breathes. And so, in the quiet after endings, we may learn to rest. We may learn to trust the rhythm that carried forests out of deserts, birds out of dinosaurs, civilizations out of ashes. The breath between ages is not silence to be feared, but silence to be honored. It is the stillness in which the next story begins. Stone is the first witness, the first archivist. Long before language, long before ink, the earth began writing its story in layers of rock. Each layer, a page, each fossil, a sentence, each stratum, a chapter in the slow unfolding of time. When eras die, they are not erased. They are pressed into stone, compacted into memory, waiting for eyes that can read them. The continents themselves carry this script, sedimentary rocks stacked one upon another. Millions of years of rivers, oceans, deserts, swamps. Basalt plains, frozen lava flows, remnants of ancient fire. Limestone built from the skeletons of creatures too small to see, yet vast enough to form mountains. Within these stones lies the record of worlds that no longer exist. When we walk across a desert plateau and see layers of red and ochre stretching into the horizon, we are looking into vanished landscapes. That red may once have been the bed of a shallow sea, teeming with trilobites. The ochre might have been a floodplain where giant amphibians dragged themselves through mud. Each stripe of color is a memory, each seam of rock a frozen moment. To the earth, nothing is forgotten, it is only buried. Fossils deepen this memory, a spiral shell embedded in limestone, a fern pressed into shale, the outline of a feather caught in volcanic ash. Each is a fragment of life preserved against time's erasure. They are not just remains, but messages. A trilobite's eye tells us how vision evolved. A dinosaur track pressed into sandstone tells us how weight was carried, how movement was made. Fossils are the letters in the Earth's alphabet, and paleontology is the act of learning to read them. But stone remembers more than shapes. It remembers climates, atmospheres, disasters. The carbon locked in coal beds tells us of ancient forests that grew thick and humid, then fell and were buried. Layers rich in iridium tell us of asteroids colliding with Earth, spreading dust across the sky. Tiny bubbles trapped in ice record the breath of past atmospheres, whispering the balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide across thousands of years. Stone holds within it both the flourishing of life and the record of its endings. There is a paradox in this memory. It is both fragile and eternal. Fossils form only under the rarest of conditions, requiring just the right balance of burial, mineralization, and preservation. Countless species left no trace. Countless ages have only partial records. And yet what is preserved can endure for hundreds of millions of years. A shell in stone may outlast the lineage that made it by 100-fold. A ripple mark frozen in sandstone may last longer than the ocean that formed it. Fragile, yet enduring, like memory itself. For humans, stone memory is both a teacher and a mirror. It reminds us of the brevity of our own existence. Civilizations rise, build in stone, and still crumble. Cities sink into earth, temples weather, monuments erode. Yet beneath our ruins, the deeper stones remain, carrying memories that dwarf our histories. A cathedral is ancient to us. To granite, it is a brief engraving. A pyramid is monumental to us. To sandstone cliffs, it is only a passing mark. And yet we, too, have tried to write in stone. Our carvings, inscriptions, and monuments are attempts to join the Earth's archive, to say, we were here. From petroglyphs etched into canyon walls, to stele raised in deserts, from gravestones to skyscrapers, humans use stone to remember. But our memories are temporary beside the Earth's. Rain will blur our carvings. Wind will level our walls. Oceans will claim our coasts. What remains longest are not our words, but the layers of the earth itself. The deepest memory is written where stone meets silence, in canyons, in cliffs, in mountains cut open by rivers. Stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon, and you are not looking at scenery. You are looking at time. 2 billion years layered downward. A record of seas rising and falling, of continents colliding and drifting, of entire ecosystems coming and going. To gaze into such depth is to confront the immensity of the Earth's memory and the smallness of our own. And yet, this smallness need not be despair. To know that the Earth remembers is to feel connected to something vast. The memory of stone is impartial, unjudging. It records without preference, without bias. It remembers dinosaurs and dragonflies, cataclysms and calms, our ancestors and their tools. To be written into stone, even briefly, is to be part of this unbroken story. There is also comfort in knowing that memory is shared. Even when species vanish, their existence is not erased. They remain in the archive of stone, still whispering their story to those who can listen. We, too, will vanish, but traces will remain. Bones fossilized, plastics hardened into geologic layers, cities turned to mineral ruins. Long after we are gone, the earth will remember us. Perhaps not with clarity, but with presence. We will be one more stratum, one more chapter in the book of stone. For those lying awake, caught between the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future, there is solace in this. The earth does not forget, and yet it does not cling. It carries memory quietly, patiently, without sorrow. It is we who load memory with grief. The stones simply hold. In their silence, they remind us that all things pass and all things remain. To rest in the memory of stone is to rest in continuity, to feel that even when eras die, they are not lost. They are transformed into layers, into fossils, into whispers carried forward. Time does not erase, it reshapes. Memory does not vanish, it becomes sediment, waiting to be read. In this way, nothing is truly gone. Everything is remembered in stone. And so, when you next walk along a rocky shore or see cliffs layered like pages, imagine yourself as a reader of Earth's memory. Each ripple, each grain, each fossil is a word from a vanished age. The story is not yet finished, and you are part of its writing. The earth remembers you, too, in ways you cannot yet see. Human beings have always lived in the shadow of endings. Long before we had words for mass extinctions or geological epochs, we sensed that time moves in cycles, that what rises must fall, and that no era, no people, no kingdom endures forever. Our myths and stories, scattered across continents and centuries, are filled with floods, fires, collapses, and renewals. They are not mere imagination. They are humanity's echo of the deeper truth the earth has always known. Eras die like people, quietly, then all at once. In the oldest myths, endings often arrive as water. The Sumerian tale of Utnapishtim, the biblical flood of Noah, the Hindu story of Manu, the Hopi legends of submerged worlds, all speak of civilizations swept away, of memory erased by the rising sea. Water, patient and enduring, is also sudden and devastating. It nurtures, but it also drowns. For early peoples, this duality mirrored life itself. Prosperity and ruin were not opposites, but partners in the same dance. Other myths turn to fire. The Norse spoke of Ragnarok, when the world would be consumed in flame before it was reborn. The Aztecs told of suns destroyed in fire and darkness, each age collapsing so another could begin. In these fiery endings, humanity recognized the destructive power of the very forces that gave life. The sun that warms can also burn. The fire that cooks can also devour. What gives can also take away. Collapse stories do not only live in myth. They are etched into human history. The fall of the Roman Empire, the decline of the Maya, the crumbling of Angkor, the ghost cities of Mesopotamia. These are not simply the past tragedies. They are echoes of Earth's wider rhythms, scaled down into human lifetimes. We see in them a miniature version of what the Earth has always enacted: flourishing, overreach, exhaustion, collapse, renewal. When we read about crumbling empires, we are reading the human form of extinction. Civilizations fall for many reasons: droughts, plagues, wars, exhaustion of resources, shifts in trade. the failure of governance. But beneath them all is a common thread: fragility disguised as permanence. Every empire believes it is eternal. Every city imagines itself the center of the world. Yet the ground shifts, rivers change course, climates alter, and what was stable dissolves. Time unmakes what time created. And in their ruins, humanity is reminded of the deeper pattern. Permanence is an illusion. Yet endings in the human story are never only endings. With each collapse comes transformation. The ruins of Greece nourished Rome. The ruins of Rome nourished Europe. The ruins of the Maya still shape Central American culture. When one story ends, another begins, written with fragments of the old. Just as extinction clears the way for new species, collapse clears the way for new societies. Our history mirrors evolution. Life emerges, thrives, falters, transforms. Humanity is part of that same rhythm. There is also a personal echo within this larger cycle. Just as civilizations end, so do lives. Each death is a microcosm of collapse. We live, we build, we dream, we gather memory, and then, all at once, we fall silent. Our personal endings echo the endings of empires, and those echo the endings of eras. Death is not separate from extinction. It is extinction scaled to the human frame. And yet, just as life as a whole continues after extinctions, so too does memory continue after death. We live on in the lives of others, in words, in echoes. In this way, our myths of floods and fires, our histories of collapse, are also forms of preparation. They are rehearsals for impermanence. They remind us that what we cherish will one day dissolve, but that dissolution is not the end of all things. It is a passage, a transformation. Just as forests regrow after fire, just as rivers carve new valleys after floods, so too does humanity rebuild, renew, and reimagine itself after collapse. Still, there is unease. We live in a time when our own civilization seems vast and unshakable. Our networks span the globe. Our technologies touch the sky. Our numbers fill every continent. And yet, deep within us, there lingers the awareness that we are not immune to the same cycles that ended those who came before. Climate change, extinctions, shifting resources, and fragile political structures all remind us we are still part of Earth's rhythm. We have not stepped outside of it. We never will. But there is comfort, too. For if collapse is part of the pattern, so is renewal. What ends does not end everything. The ruins of our age, if they come, will not erase the earth. They will not erase life. They will not erase the memory written into stone, into ocean, into air. Just as other eras gave way to new life, ours too would become the soil of what comes next. To see this truth clearly is not despair. It is clarity. It is the acceptance that we are part of something larger than ourselves, and that the story continues even when our chapter closes. For the sleepless listener, drifting between wake and dream, there is a strange peace in this, to know that we are not the first to fear endings, nor will we be the last. To know that even collapse is not chaos, but part of the music of time. The echoes in our myths, in our histories, are reminders that humanity has always sensed this, and has always endured. Endings come quietly, then all at once, but beginnings always follow. When eras end, when empires crumble, when lives fall silent, there is always a pause. The storm of collapse passes, leaving a stillness so complete it feels sacred. Silence after endings is not emptiness. It is the breath held between what has passed and what is yet to begin. In that quiet, the earth itself seems to wait, to listen, to gather strength for renewal. Silence is not absence. It is presence in another form. After the fall of a civilization, the noise of armies, markets, and voices fades. What remains is the wind moving through abandoned stone. Grass pushes gently between cracks in forgotten streets. Rivers return to flood fields once carved by human hands. In this way, silence speaks. It tells of time's patience, of the earth's quiet persistence, of the truth that life does not end with us. It merely pauses, reshapes, and continues. The stillness after endings is not only external. It exists within us too. When someone we love dies, or when a great change sweeps away the life we knew, the silence that follows is overwhelming. It is the quiet of absence, but also the quiet of reflection. It forces us to listen to what we could not hear before, the fragile beating of our own hearts, the whisper of memory, the truth of impermanence. Silence is a teacher, though its lessons are slow and difficult to bear. In Earth's story, silence follows extinction. When the great dying swept across the planet, the cries of vanished creatures were replaced by emptiness. Forests once filled with song grew hushed. Seas once alive with movement turned still. It is tempting to imagine this as tragedy alone, but silence was also possibility. It was the space in which evolution paused, reset, and prepared for new beginnings. In the quiet after endings, the seeds of renewal are planted. Silence, in its deepest sense, is not lifeless. It is pregnant with potential. Think of a forest after fire. The air is thick with ash, the ground blackened, the animals gone. Yet in that stillness, hidden beneath the soil, seeds wait. Rain falls. Shoots emerge. Insects return. Slowly, quietly, life reclaims the silence. What looks like absence is only preparation for return. Human history echoes this rhythm. After Rome fell, centuries of silence followed in Europe. Roads crumbled, cities emptied, knowledge was scattered. But in that stillness, monasteries kept learning alive. Farmers developed new ways to live from the land. Small communities slowly wove the fabric that would become a new age. The silence after collapse was not wasted. It was gestation. Without that pause, the next chapter could not have formed. Silence is also the heart of music. Between notes, between rhythms, it is the pause that gives shape to sound. Without silence, music would be noise. Without stillness, renewal would be chaos. Endings demand this pause, this breath of nothing, to make way for what follows. The silence after the storm is part of the pattern, as essential as the storm itself. We often fear silence because it feels like emptiness. We fill our lives with sound, with movement, with distraction, because silence forces us to face what lies beneath. Yet in times of ending, silence arrives whether we welcome it or not. It comes with loss, with collapse, with death. And when it does, it reveals truths we cannot ignore. That nothing lasts forever, that grief and renewal are intertwined, that life's strength is not in permanence, but in resilience. Consider the silence of space. Between stars, between galaxies, there is vast emptiness. Yet from that emptiness, stars are born. Galaxies emerge. Planets form. What seems like silence is the canvas upon which existence paints itself. The silence after endings is no different. It is cosmic in its vastness, intimate in its closeness. It is both the void and the womb. For the listener drifting into sleep, silence becomes more than absence of sound. It is the quieting of thought, the soft dimming of the mind's restless voices. As one floats toward dreams, silence is the threshold, the moment where wakefulness dissolves and the self loosens into something wider. In this way, every night echoes extinction. Every sleep echoes renewal. Silence is not only an ending, but the necessary bridge to a new beginning. And so, when eras end, when storms pass, when lives fall quiet, what remains is not despair but stillness, the stillness of possibility. The earth has lived through countless endings, and each silence has carried within it the seeds of what comes next. We too, in our grief and our endings, carry within us the quiet potential for renewal. Silence is not the end of the story. It is the pause that allows the next chapter to begin. The story of humanity at this moment feels vast and unstoppable. We have built cities that shine from orbit, networks that link voices across oceans, machines that think in patterns once reserved for living minds. Our species has touched the moon, mapped the human genome, probed the depths of the atom and the far edges of the cosmos. To live now is to stand on the crest of a wave millions of years in the making, lifted higher than any era before. And yet, for all its height, the wave is fragile. It curls upon itself, suspended in balance, its fall inevitable. Civilizations before us have believed they were eternal. Rome thought its empire would last forever. The Maya believed their world had been ordered by divine cycles beyond decay. Egypt's monuments were carved to outlast time. But each discovered the same truth. What feels permanent in one age is revealed as fleeting in the next. Our world, too, is fragile. It depends upon delicate systems we rarely see. A thin layer of atmosphere shields us from the sun's rage. Networks of soil fungi sustain forests that clean the air. Ocean currents move heat around the globe, holding climate in balance. A single disruption, a shift in temperature, a breakdown in biodiversity, a failure of food supply, can ripple outward until the fabric tears. The miracle of our age rests on threads too fine to notice until they snap. Fragility also lives within our human systems. We imagine the global economy as solid, yet a single market collapse can echo through nations. We trust technology to knit us together, yet a severed cable or corrupted grid can silence billions. Our food moves across continents. Our medicines rely on chains of production that circle the globe. The more connected we become, the more vulnerable we are to breaks in the chain. A storm, a war, a sudden silence in the digital hum, and the world as we know it could pause. This is not to say collapse is certain, only that stability is more delicate than we pretend. Our age is extraordinary because it has multiplied fragility alongside achievement. For every skyscraper, there is the possibility of ruin. For every invention, the shadow of misuse. For every breakthrough, a dependence that may one day fail us. We live in an age of shimmering wonder, but we walk on glass. It is not only systems that are fragile, we ourselves are. Our bodies, so capable of building machines and writing symphonies, are undone by the smallest failures. A cell mutates and cancer blooms. A microbe enters and fever consumes. A sudden stop of the heart, and a life ends in silence. Individually, we know this fragility, but collectively we forget it. We pretend that because our buildings rise higher than mountains and our machines pierce the sky, we are immune to the same laws of impermanence that ruled every creature before us. Fragility is not weakness, though. It is the price of possibility. A glass vessel can shatter, but it can also hold light in ways stone cannot. A butterfly's wings are delicate, yet they carry it across distances its body should not endure. Our age is fragile precisely because it dares to reach further than any before it. It is the fragility of experiment, of risk, of the thin balance between wonder and loss. There is beauty in acknowledging this truth. To admit our fragility is to step away from illusion. It is to see our age not as a monument, but as a moment, brilliant, brief, trembling with possibility. When we see this, we may act with care. We may treat the earth not as an endless resource, but as a partner in balance. We may shape our technologies not as weapons, but as bridges. Fragility can teach us humility, and humility can teach us preservation. The fragility of tomorrow is also deeply personal. Each of us carries plans, hopes, dreams of what the future will bring. Yet tomorrow is never promised. A phone call, a diagnosis, a sudden change can alter everything. The awareness of this is frightening, but it can also awaken gratitude. To know tomorrow is fragile is to savor today more deeply, to hold the present moment with tenderness, because it is all we truly have. For humanity, the same is true. We cannot know what tomorrow will bring. Climate may shift, economies may falter, discoveries may reshape everything we thought was certain. Our tomorrow is fragile, but it is also alive with possibility. Fragility is not only the risk of breaking, it is also the openness to change. In its trembling uncertainty lies the chance for renewal, transformation, and evolution. Perhaps this is the essence of life itself. To be fragile is to be alive. Stars burn and die, yet from their ashes new stars ignite. Forests fall to fire, yet seeds rise from ash. Species vanish, yet others adapt, flourish, and take their place. Our tomorrow is fragile because it is not fixed. It waits, open, unwritten. And in that openness lies both danger and wonder. As we drift into sleep, we may imagine ourselves standing on the edge of this fragile tomorrow. Behind us lies the long story of eras that rose and fell. Before us stretches an uncertain path, shimmering, delicate, waiting to be shaped. To breathe in this awareness is to touch both humility and hope, to know that we are small, yet capable of carrying something immense. That our tomorrow is not promised, but it is possible. The fragility of tomorrow is not something to fear, but something to cradle. Like a candle in the dark, it must be sheltered, tended, protected from the winds of carelessness and neglect. For if we hold it carefully, tomorrow may burn brighter than today. And if it falters, then silence will come, as it always does, to begin again. When an era ends, the silence it leaves feels absolute. The ruins of civilizations stand like broken teeth against the sky, their language fading, their gods forgotten, their music silenced. Forests after fire look barren, blackened, emptied of all life. A star that collapses leaves behind a void, a grave of light. Yet silence is never the last word. Out of endings, renewal always waits. Out of ruin, something begins again. History teaches us this pattern. When Rome fell, it seemed as though order had dissolved forever into darkness. Roads crumbled, aqueducts dried, libraries burned. Yet from those ashes came new languages, new kingdoms, new ideas that would one day bloom into the Renaissance. When the Black Death swept across Europe, it felt as though civilization itself would collapse. Yet out of the grief rose movements in art, science, and humanism that reshaped the world. Even the deepest silences carry the seeds of renewal. In nature, the lesson is even clearer. A forest may be consumed by fire, but fire cracks open seeds that only grow after flames. Ash enriches soil. From blackened ground, green shoots rise, more resilient, more adapted to what has come before. Coral reefs bleach in warming seas, but tiny organisms seek out new places to build, laying foundations for future colonies. Even extinction, the great silence of life, opens space for new forms to emerge, to experiment, to try again. The cosmos itself speaks the same language. Stars collapse in violent deaths, scattering elements forged in their cores. Those elements drift through space, waiting to be gathered into new stars, new planets, and new possibilities for life. Without death, no renewal. Without silence, no song. Our very existence is proof that endings are beginnings in disguise. The iron in our blood, the calcium in our bones, the carbon in our breath, All are remnants of stars that died long before Earth was born. We are renewal made flesh. On a human scale, renewal after silence takes subtler forms. After grief, there are moments when laughter returns, hesitant but genuine. After failure, there are chances for reinvention, new paths carved where old ones collapsed. Even if humanity vanishes, renewal will come. Other species, other forms of intelligence, other arrangements of life will rise. The pattern will not break. Yet renewal is not only cosmic or historical. It is intimate, immediate, personal. Each night, when we close our eyes, we surrender to silence. Sleep washes over us like a tide, erasing the chatter of thought, dissolving the structures of day. In that silence, the mind repairs, dreams, restores itself. Each morning, we rise renewed, not the same as yesterday but altered, however subtly, by the silence of sleep. Renewal after silence is woven into the rhythm of every breath we take, every day we live. To see renewal requires patience. After loss, the silence feels endless, as though nothing could grow again. After collapse, the ruins feel eternal. But slowly, almost invisibly, renewal begins. The first green after fire is small, almost imperceptible. The first laughter after grief feels fragile. The first light after darkness is faint, easily missed. Renewal does not come with trumpets or fanfare. It arrives quietly, humbly, in small beginnings that expand with time. This rhythm, silence followed by renewal, is the heartbeat of existence. It governs stars, forests, civilizations, and souls. To resist, it is to resist life itself. To embrace, it is to find peace even in endings. For when silence comes, we may know it is not final. When we feel the weight of loss, we may remember it is the ground from which renewal will grow. Perhaps this is why we find comfort in cycles. We trust the dawn because it always returns after night. We welcome spring because it always follows winter. We believe in love again because the heart, though broken, finds ways to mend. Renewal is not a promise we invent to ease our fears. It is the structure of reality itself. Even when we do not see it, it is already unfolding. As eras die, as people fade, as worlds change, renewal waits beyond silence. It is not the return of what was, but the birth of what will be. Each ending prepares its own successor, though we may not live to see it. This is the great consolation of impermanence. Nothing lasts, but nothing ends without opening the way for what comes next. As you drift deeper into sleep, imagine the silence that follows endings not as emptiness, but as soil. In its dark quiet, seeds lie hidden. They wait, patient, enduring. And when the time is right, when conditions allow, they will rise. Renewal after silence is not an exception to the rule. It is the rule itself. Life is shaped not by permanence, but by the rhythm of endings and beginnings, silence and renewal, grief and wonder. Rest with this thought. Endings are never final. Silence is never absolute. Renewal always waits. Every ending leaves behind an echo. Not the sound itself, not the fullness of what once was, but a trace that lingers in the air, faint yet enduring. Civilizations crumble, forests fall, stars extinguish their light, yet something of them remains, a whisper, a resonance, a mark carried forward into what follows. Endings are not pure erasure. They leave shadows, memories, imprints that ripple into the future. We see this in the ruins of ancient worlds. The columns of Greece, fractured yet still standing, hold echoes of debates once spoken beneath them. The carvings of Egypt preserve echoes of prayers, hands pressing stone in hope of eternity. Even fragments, even ruins, carry a hum that time cannot silence. When we walk among them, we feel the presence of lives long gone, as though the stones themselves remember. Echoes are not only physical. They reside in language, in thought, in the invisible architecture of culture. Every word we speak is shaped by centuries of echoes. Ancient tongues whose syllables melted and reformed until they became the sounds we use today. The stories we tell, even the most modern inventions, echo myths from thousands of years ago. Heroes journey, lovers lose, tricksters deceive, patterns repeated because echoes never truly fade. They reshape themselves like waves bouncing between canyon walls, altered but present. In nature, too, echoes endure. The shape of a coastline can reveal the memory of vanished glaciers. The rings of a tree whisper of droughts and storms centuries past. The DNA within our cells carries echoes of lives lived billions of years ago, microbes that split, adapted, and survived, leaving traces of their endurance within us. We are walking echoes, breathing remnants, living archives of survival. Even silence has an echo. After grief, the memory of laughter rings louder. After collapse, the memory of order becomes more precious. When sound ceases, the space it leaves behind resonates in its absence. To notice silence is already to hear its echo, the ghost of what was once present. This is why echoes are powerful. They are reminders that nothing disappears entirely. Every end leaves behind something to be carried forward. Stars leave echoes in light that travels long after they are gone. A star that died before Earth was formed still sends photons across space, and when we look up at the night sky, we see its echo shimmering faintly. Galaxies colliding leave gravitational ripples that pass invisibly through our bodies as we sleep. The cosmos hums with echoes we cannot always perceive, yet they are there, shaping the fabric of reality. On the human scale, echoes are memory, the smile of someone gone remembered in a quiet moment, the words of a teacher still guiding decades later, the scent of a place long left behind, resurfacing suddenly, carrying us back in time. These echoes do not fade quickly. They become part of us, carried inward, reshaped with each retelling, each remembrance. Memory is not a perfect recording, but an echo, softened, stretched, transformed. And yet, it preserves the essence of what was. Perhaps this is why we fear oblivion, why we long for legacy. We wish to leave an echo, something that carries us forward even after silence claims us. It may be words we write, ideas we share, kindness we offer, or simply the impression left on those we love. Each of us becomes an echo in someone else's life, a resonance that lingers after we are gone. In this way, no life is ever entirely lost. Each is folded into the fabric of echoes that weave the human story. But echoes are fragile. They fade if not carried, distort if not remembered. The great challenge of history, of art, of storytelling, is to keep echoes alive, to let them move forward without dissolving into silence. We build monuments, write books, record voices not only to preserve, but to ensure that echoes continue. For in echoes, eras endure beyond themselves. And yet, there is peace in knowing echoes do not need to be perfect. Even distorted, even softened, they serve their purpose.